Welcome to another episode of Life Stories with Marty. I'm Marty here in Melbourne, and today we have a very special guest, Fran King. Love the name, Fran King. Fran was one of the pioneers of the Beatles cover band back in the 60s. He's got an amazing story. Now, we're going to go into all of that and play a couple of his songs, but I want to start off with one that is lovely, and we're going to play this one is Fine Day, and then we'll cross over to Dublin and we'll have a chat with Fran.
Got my feet on solid ground, in a place with no one else around. For miles, jumped aboard the raft of time, taking with me what was mine. Alone, and it's a real fine day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a real fine drifting on the sounds of fate. Come ashore before it gets too late. I will, and it's a real fine day. Yeah, yeah. It's a real fine day. Yeah, yeah. There's no egos compromising what I've set on track. Realize that where I come from, there's no turning back, and it's a real fine day. It's a real fine day. Yeah,
Beach Boys. I heard there.
Fran, welcome to the show.
Hello, Marty. Great to be here.
Oh, it's an honor is all mine, and we've heard your intro and some of your music, and I want to go into your music. And I want to start off first of all. I've been privileged to get to talk to you, and you have, my God, I could spend an hour. I don't think we're going to fit in an hour with you, but I'm going to just let you, and it wouldn't be the first time you hit it, take the mic and start off. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up in Dublin, in Ireland, and lead on and into what inspired you, and especially with the Beatles tribute band and on into the other
Yeah.
stuff you've done. So the mic is yours, my friend.
Oh, it's lovely to be here. First and foremost, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
It's my return to Melbourne, having been there years ago on tour, and I had a wonderful time out there and all up the Gold Coast. Yeah, I started in music. I come from Greenhills, which is southwest Dublin. It's right near some very iconic kind of neighborhoods. Like I suppose behind me is Crumlin, where Brendan Behan came from. And up the road from me, literally at the top of my street, is where Brian Downey, the drummer from Thin Lizzy, came from.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, Phil Lynott himself came from Crumlin Village. The next village over is Temple Ogue, and you know, it's I suppose, yeah, Southwest, a kind of quietish neighborhood. You know, it wasn't in the '60s; it was full of life and full of, you know, it was a brand new neighborhood. But it's we're into now the third generation, so it's very mellow and very nice place as a writer to live and stuff like that. I got into music probably through listening to my three elder sisters' record collection. And being the youngest in the family, I wouldn't have had access to the record player like you wouldn't have back then. It was the domain of your older siblings and your parents. So I had, on one hand, the influence of my father's collection, which would have been Sinatra and the Crooners, which I still love to this day. And then my elder sister turned me on to Elvis, as probably everybody's elder brother or elder sister did back in the day. And that was the mid '70s. And then we were listening to stuff with my middle sister, like Bob Dylan and Van Morrison and Leonard Cohen, all the great songwriters per se. And then you had the pop stuff like Slade was happening, Mark Bolan. So this was the huge whirlwind of music that was going around me as a kid and influenced, you know, my listening, my, I suppose, if you're looking for a common thread through them all, it's probably melodic change. You know, we were in a very unique era coming up from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where melody was still a key to music. So that's a big influence on my songwriting, right up through the middle years. And I was kind of late to the game as a musician. When you say a lot of musicians you'd probably interview would probably have started playing an instrument around 9 or 10. I was probably about 15 when I levitated towards guitar through a friend who went to lessons and didn't make the lessons and handed me this beaten up Spanish guitar, not unlike this one here, a bashed up old acoustic guitar. And he said, "Here you go." I couldn't make head or tail of those lessons. So he handed it to me for some reason. And my dad, I think, found an old '60s teach yourself guitar book. And then in the winter of 1986, we were snowed in with snowdrifts of like 6 feet. And that was all you had. You know, internet back then. So it was sit
Oh,
down, let's try and work this thing out. So I did. I spent the whole winter working on the acoustic guitar and learning three chords and the truth, as they say. And that was the beginning of it all, really. That was the start. That was the little touch paper that lit the whole thing, which
and
is it.
did your parents, you said mentioned about your dad, what were your siblings? Did they encourage you, or did they want to go get a normal job without trying to make a living out of music?
Well, my mother, it was the middle of the '80s, it was middle of the biggest, I suppose the most iconic of all the kind of great recessions in Ireland was the '80s. It was when we had, for the second time in our history, the huge export of our youth.
Yep.
We went around the world, Australia, England, America, some parts of Europe. And I knew, I suppose, on my street alone, where I'm back living at the moment, I lived away from here for a long, long time, but I'm back living in the house where I grew up in. Um, I probably lost about one, two, three, four neighbours as my age or older young lads who went abroad to work during. I know in 1986 I was still in school. 1987 I did my leaving cert, which I suppose is leaving high school over there.
Yep.
And really, it was on the cards. It was written ahead of you. You were going to be basically educated to go abroad. And I was like very, very family minded. I loved being here. I was very close with my family. I didn't want it, the idea, didn't like the prospect of going abroad and having to emigrate. So I worked hard at being a musician. And my mother wanted me to be an office junior, like work, you know, get a steady job that if you got a job in an office, it's something to fall back on. So I
Yep.
pursued that for a little while. I went to college and I did my City and Guild certificate in basic programming and computing and stuff like that. And really, I was apprenticing with my dad as well. My dad was a cabinet maker by trade.
Ah,
So he was still working throughout the recession. So I would go on jobs with him. And he pretty soon learned, like maybe a year one into it, that like really your heart is in music. Because I'd be, bits of wood that were on the ground, I'd be making guitar necks out of it and I'd be practicing chord sequences. And he'd say,
yeah.
"You're just not into this, are you?" I was like, "No, music is where I'm going." So when the recession started to turn, it got a little better about the late 80s. I was in a few little local bands. And then I progressed to a band known as the Beatles, just Beatles with another S. And they were a covers band that played on the Dublin scene, but they were kind of an eclectic raggle-taggle gypsy band of an English lead singer from Wolverhampton. We had a Scottish guitarist, we had an American guitarist, and myself and another guy joined at the very last lineup of the band. It was a huge band on the Dublin scene. We used to
Yeah.
stuff venues like Whelan's to this day, packed to the rafters. So it was getting really interesting that I managed to be, I was headhunted into that band. He saw me busking this guy and he said, "Do you want to be in my band?" And I was, "What's your band?" He said, "The Beatles." I was like, "Geez, I've seen that band. They're brilliant." He said, "Well, we'd love to have you on board." So I joined, got in kind of late. I was only about 20. And I invited my dad down to see a show at Whelan's. I said, "Dad, I'd really love to be a musician." And my dad was like, "Well, your mum's not set against it. We've just we're coming out of a recession. I don't know if there's any money in music." So I was like, "Well, what can I do to persuade you?" He said, "I'll come see the show and let me talk to mum." So he came to Whelan's and it was ram-packed to the rafters. And we used to do this segment where we would stop playing acoustically at the end of the gig and sing a cappella, six of us. And the rafters came down and my dad came up to me after the show and he goes, "I get it. I get it. I think you can do it." So he went back and had a chat with my mom. She was then dissuaded to let me finish my job. I was working for a travel firm, inputting data into a computer, really mind-numbing stuff. But I was given the full-time job, which was a hard, which was hen's teeth in a recession. And the other band had asked me to go full-time. And I said, I made the decision over the weekend. I got the job, got given the job after work experience on the Friday. I left on the Saturday, and I've been a full-time musician ever since.
And when was the first time, Fran, that with your mother you were saying about doing a musician, not taking an office job or a full time?
Yeah,
When did you feel confident you got your first pay packet?
I think about a year, no, just under a year after that, after kind of navigating a lot of the kind of sub scene of the music scene here, we started to make headway, and I subsequently left that band and felt at the time they were a covers band that did, the name being Beatles. They did a bit of Beatles, but they did a lot of 60s stuff, a lot of the melodic music that I loved to grow up with. But I said to one of the guys I was busking with, because I was still busking on Grafton Street during the day, because that's the way I felt you were honing your craft. You were projecting your voice. You were learning the mastery of guitar. To me, that was a great stomping ground. That was my rehearsal space, was either on the streets of Grafton Street or Henry Street in Dublin. Plying your wares, as they say. So I met this other chap who was busking also, and he was a Beatle fanatic. And I said, "Why don't we set up a band that just does Beatles?" And he even looked at me and went, "Just does Beatles for the whole night?" I was like, "Yeah, we love it. Let's self-indulge in it and let's see if we can make money out of it." So that was in 1990, and we set up a band. Nicked the name from John Lennon's band, but John Lennon's original band were called the Quarry Men. We put Quarry Men as all one word, the Quarry Men, and let's see if we can build and get Beatle fans in, because I knew there was an underbelly of Beatles nuts in Dublin.
Mm.
So we did it. It took about 6 months to kind of light the touch paper and get that going, but it took off like a rocket. And I suppose subsequently we kind of pioneered the tribute scene. You had, Bjorn again coming from Australia, actually over to Ireland.
That's
And
right.
that was the
Yeah.
first time I heard the term tribute band. It was like, oh, these guys are going to play ABBA all night. Surely there's a precedent for us. So we did that. And we always said to ourselves, look, we're writing original music. So why don't we use one thing to fund the other thing? So make it like, so that you don't have to go during the day saying to the other guitar player and say, "Do you want fries with that?" you're in the music field playing covers at night, but you're also, you know what I mean? So you're still in the same field. You're not having to
As you
practice all
said
the time.
there,
We will be
the ABBA
playing.
band, the cover band here
Yeah.
was
So,
Baba.
yeah, I've heard that.
Baba,
Yeah.
and they actually played for me at Molly Bloom's in Port Melbourne, one of my hotels back
Well,
in
there
the
you
80s.
go.
Yeah, so sorry, carry on,
So we
please.
were doing the same thing. We were doing a thing called the Quarrymen, and we would advertise our shows by busking on Grafton Street, stopping the entire traffic, and then we would have a poster behind us saying "Playing tonight at Charlie's Bar," da 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 da, and we would have packed houses all the time. So eventually, what happened was within the space of, since my dad had seen me in Whelan's, about a year, a good kind of, a working year, we'd worked our way up to MCD asking us to play the Olympia Theatre, which is a big theatre in Dublin,
Oh,
1,200 seater.
Yep.
So on our first night, so we packed it, we did well, and that was the first show I invited my mum to, and I reserved her a box because they have those old Victorian boxes, and my mum and dad were in the box, and I was speaking to my mum in the green room after the show, and she was, professing how proud she was, and she said, "Would you believe it? Your father and me came to see Laurel and Hardy in a stage show here in 1954. Little did I know my son would be up there playing on the same stage that Houdini had done his first escaping from the water tank in Europe in that stage, So that was a proud moment,
Wow, wow, wow. Now, just before we go into some more of your music, tell me a little bit more, just to rewind a bit, and we have spoken about this, is about your sisters, your older sisters.
Yeah.
If you want to just let the audience know.
Yeah. Yeah. Very tragically, shortly after this, the start of the cover band, and that got really successful, like really successful in Dublin, in such a way that it actually undermined our original thing. We got too well known as that Beatles tribute band that we were also trying to break through, because, as I said, we're one thing to fund the other thing. We were doing our original music, so we started recording and we made a single in 1997. And I was in an original band called Beach, which were the same members that were in the Beatles band, all four of us. But we were doing completely my own songs, and we went into a recording studio and recorded a single and a B-side, and we put it out in 1997. The same year, my middle sister, Linda, who was born in 1960, there was me, my sister Elaine, born in 64, but Linda was born in 60, and my elder sister Angela was born in 56. So they were still around. They were like, living in their own homes. But she tragically was killed she was hit by a truck basically on her way home from work, and died about 11 days later. But that was a seismic event that happened right when the first single had come out in my original band. So it was almost like perfectly time stamped, as everything had been building, in a very cottage industry sort of way, and the proverbial rug was pulled from under me when that happened in February 1997. And I suppose it brought everything back into perspective, because the way we talk about things is we get very focused on our career and very focused on us and our ego, and we must do this and those milestones and the goalposts you should be reaching within the music business and within life, I suppose, from a very early age. And I got kind of sidetracked and really sucker punched with that, because I was the closest to my middle sister. She was like the closest thing to a brother to me in that sense.
And what was her name?
Linda was her name, and she was the one that was listening to Bob Dylan and listening to the most current music at the time, whereas Angela, my elder sister, had been listening to the older stuff, like she'd be listening to Elvis, and then in the 70s was into disco and stuff like that. And my younger of my three sisters, who's still alive here, Elaine, was listening to contemporary stuff that was going on in the 80s. So really the one that was influencing my musical tastes was my middle sister. And she was gone, and she came to a lot of the shows, came to an awful lot of my early shows, and was hugely supportive. And that to me was the biggest hole in the boat, really was, for a long time. And it was very, very, very hard to get through. And to be honest with you, I was only dealing with the residual grief from it up to a couple of years ago.
Yep.
And I wisely decided to go to some counselling and some therapy for it, because we carry these things around, as you well
Yep.
know.
Yep.
Life experiences we tend to carry trauma rather than face it, put it down, and move on, because it's very hard to say goodbye to something and someone,
Yep.
especially.
Yep.
So that had a profound effect on me at that period of my life, and it also put things into perspective with the original band, because I was looking at the material I was writing, and it was facile. I thought it was facile. I thought, looking back on the material I was writing with the original band, I had nothing to say. To sum it up in a nutshell, and record companies were sniffing around. We had Mother Records were sniffing in Ireland, and we were named in some fancy magazine as the next big thing to come out of Ireland, but nobody was biting. And I started to kind of, I suppose, an inward look at what's wrong with the songwriting? Is there something wrong with the songs? And I kind of found, if I was honest with myself, and you have to be honest with yourself,
Yeah.
I really had nothing to say. The songs were blah, And after that, from that point on, the band kind of imploded a couple of years out of the original band. But we kept the tribute band going for years. But we stopped doing the original thing with that band around about 2000, I'd say 2001. We did another couple of singles. And then I realized, I have something to say, but not with this band. I have something to say on my own. So I started venturing into writing what then became my first solo album.
Yeah.
And then that's a very, very personal collection called Beautification, and only ironically came out on the streaming networks last year. Because in those days, of course, it was CD sales, and it was all CDs, or if you're lucky enough, vinyl. But CDs were the thing, and it sold, unremarkably. It probably went gold over about the period of 6 or 10 years, but it got there. And it was independently funded by the guy who used to manage my old band, Beach, and the late great Mr. O'Loughlin. He was fantastic. And unfortunately, he died of cancer shortly after my sister had died. And he was the one big kind of guy saying to me, I have every faith in your stuff, but yeah, if you feel you have to go and write songs for you and about your life experience, go and do it. So I did that, and they were all distilled into the first album, which was produced by Duncan Maitland, who subsequently I had met on a tour. We were touring years ago, about 1999, with my band Beach and his band Picture House, which were very big on the scene here in Ireland. They got signed in the UK to London Records and stuff like that. So they were a signed band, and they were playing to good audiences. So on that last route of theirs, we got to piggyback as the opening act on that tour. So me and Duncan, the guitar player, who was from Stoke-on-Trent in England, became very close. And then he decided, lo and behold, right in the middle of that tour, to leave the band. He just decided, I'm not getting anything out of this anymore. And really, they were at the summit of their career. So it was a really strange time for him to jettison the band. And likewise, some of the music magazines in Ireland were then talking about Beach, my band, as being possibly the next thing to go pop. And I decided to leave. So the two of us jettisoned from our bands around about 6 months between us. And I met Duncan again at a chance meeting in Dublin City. And I said, look, I'd love to record a solo album, because I'm away from the band now. And he goes, well, why don't you record it with me? I'll produce it. So that's what we did. He produced the record, because he's worked with Pete Glenister and he toured with Meatloaf and all these people. So he had this great musical experience. So Duncan ended up producing the first album.
Wow.
And that was the point of getting on the ladder and taking my music seriously. And then just as soon as that had happened, that was 2005. My eldest sister Angela was diagnosed with cancer of the brain. So really, I felt like this was a curse. I'd lost Linda in the years with Beach, 97. Now in 2004, Angela was diagnosed with in a very aggressive form of cancer of the brain, which really kind of showed itself in the most innocuous way. She kind of developed a limp, and the doctor was thinking, you must have done your back in or pulled a disc or something. And apparently that's the way the lobe works. Whatever, it's your coordinate, the gait of your walk becomes affected, and that's one of the telltale signs of this particular blastoma, as it's called. And like that, it was super aggressive, and within a year it had killed her. She died just so we'd all remember, she died on Patrick's Day, 2004, and
Bless
that
her.
really knocked the wind from my sails. You know, right in the middle of. It was only a year later I put out the first solo album, but not before I got a chance to write a song about both sisters called "Dearly Departed" on the first album.
Oh,
And really,
wow.
when I recorded it, this is another strange and eerie story connected to the whole thing. We were
Yeah.
in the studio recording the album, the first album, and I said to Duncan, I have this song called Dearly Departed about my late sister Linda. I said, it's kind of just a thing on flux, but it's an idea. See what you think. So we started crafting the song, and it involves a lot of harmonies and a build-up layer of harmonies in the middle. And we were doing these on a sampler. You know, he was using it to create extra tracks because he had a home studio. It was basically in his flat in Rathmines. So we were building up all these tracks, spent all day doing this. And then he said, right, we've got enough harmonies now. We'll plug out the sampler and go back to the main desk and import them in. And didn't he pull out the wrong plug and wiped the entire track? So
no.
we'd spent all day on this, layering these intricate harmonies, not a reference. Everything was gone from the hard drive. And I think there's even a photograph of the moment survived. He picked up one of those, you know, those cameras you used to find at weddings where you take a picture and you give it to the bride and groom. They develop it, disposable camera.
Yeah.
I think he took a picture of the two of our faces looking like vastly kind of shell shocked at this, just to capture the moment. But ironically, and this is the strange thing, so all traces of the song Dearly Departed disappeared. Now, we, of course, I knew the track inside out, but the recording of it disappeared that day. I went home that afternoon, and that was when I was told by a phone call that my late sister Angela was diagnosed with cancer that same day. It's almost like fate was saying to me, hang on a second, this song is only starting, really. So that's ironic and strange, and I don't know what you'd call it. Yeah, and that's we finished a proper studio version, but when the song ended up being finished, by then my late sister Angela had died as well, so it was kind of very strange.
And what was the name of the song again?
It's the last song on the first album called Dearly Departed.
Dearly Departed. Can we play that at the end of the show?
Sure, absolutely, yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We got two songs, but I'd like to put that on because that's my brother had brain surgery. He was lucky at a 50-50 chance. I don't know all the data, but grade the highest grade, and 18 years later, and he's done it. And then some people it takes them. It's just a horrible part of life, isn't it?
Yeah, this one was particularly aggressive. And I didn't know an awful lot about particularly brain cancer, and how much time we would have. But the doctors were kind of saying, you know, there's all sorts of radical treatments going on. There was talk of George Harrison's doctor had found this unorthodox way of dealing with certain types of brain cancer that was having miraculous kind of results at making people, if not cure them, but elongating their life to maybe 10 years more. And so we were like, Jesus, fascinated with this. So my wife at the time was American from New York. And we were like, I wonder, does anybody, you know, would anybody know a doctor that knows this doctor in New York? So as it turned out, serendipitously, an uncle of hers knew this doctor very well and could get our charts, my sister's charts, to this guy. And if he thought it was operable, if he was going to look at the charts, we had a chance of jumping a queue and getting her over there and maybe getting some kind of treatment. So we pursued this in America. We went to New York one Christmas, the Christmas that she was diagnosed, and we got the files to the relevant doctor. And apparently, the story goes, he looked at the first page and he went, "Nah, this is terminal. And he said, not only is this terminal, she'll be dead within less than a year. It's super aggressive. It colonizes the whole surface of both lobes, and then you've no chance, you know."
That's shocking. And Fran, how did she deal with it? I know. How did she accept it? I'm trying to look for.
It was a series of very strange things happened around that time. I went in to see her before going to America. Now she had gone into kind of, I suppose, when you were talking to her around that period, which we were going to America for around December of that year of 2003. So I went in to see her. She was in her own little suite, and she was sitting. They'd hoisted her out of the bed and put her in a seat by the window, and she had a bandana. She'd lost her hair from the chemotherapy, so she was sat there in the window. Now she was making conversation, and every now and again she'd grimace like there was something going, like a glitch was going on with the brain. So obviously this was the cancer in full swing. Now she wasn't in any real pain per se because she was medicated and stuff like that. But at this particular juncture, when you would go to visit her, she was quite psychedelic in her talk, I guess is the way you could put it. Like I went in to visit her, and as I went into the room, she was sitting in the window, bathed in the sunlight coming in the window, and there was a radio on because the nurses had been told she loved Gilbert O'Sullivan. She loved that 70s period of music. If you just have some channel on the background that plays that, that would be quite soothing for her. And as I went in, there was some classical music playing, you know, some beautiful, maybe it was, I don't know what it was, Chopin or something, but it was beautiful. And it was very soothing. So I heard this playing in the background. She was sat in the window. So I turned off the radio. And we sat down and had a conversation for about half an hour. Now it was very, very strange conversation. Some of it was quite lucid, and some of it was quite, as I said, almost extraterrestrial. She was talking about things about like, I'm just going to go home now and get the dinner ready for the kids. She hadn't walked in weeks, you know, she hadn't been home in weeks. And so what the doctors were saying, encourage her, don't act like that's a kind of a strange thing. Go on like it's the most normal thing that's ever happened, and try and encourage her, because it's obviously the condition, and it's gaining more and more territory within the brain. So so she was quiet for a few minutes looking at the window, and I said, are you okay? And she said, oh, I'm just waiting on the lulls, the gaps between the music. I said, the gaps between the music? She goes, yeah, you know, the lull between the music songs. And I kind of didn't know what she meant for a minute. I was like, okay. So I played along. I was like, okay. She said, yeah, you know, like that song, Beautiful Dreamer. And I was like, wow. Yeah, yeah. So we talked about this. And then, of course, the subject popped to something else and something else. So I stayed for about, I suppose, 45 minutes, because I was heading off to America about 2 days later to see, hopefully, this doctor, and maybe get some kind of information that if we could do anything at all. So I gave her a kiss on the head, and as I was leaving, I remembered I better turn on the radio to keep her company. And I turned on the radio, and Beautiful Dreamer is playing on the radio.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Instantaneously. It's in the middle of the song.
That's lovely memories, Fran.
It was surreal. It was
honestly,
one of those things, one of those things you don't think about it afterwards. Oh, that's unusual. That hit me straight away. That was like,
yeah.
What? You were talking about Beautiful Dreamer half an hour ago, and now it's in the middle of the song, because I didn't recognize the tune when I put it on first, and then the chorus hit in. Da, 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 da. I was like, wow.
She knew. She knew.
You know, and it wasn't like she heard a presenter say it earlier. She couldn't follow at that stage. She wasn't. There was no, there was no rhyme or reason to what she was talking about. She wasn't on a timeline where she was saying, "Oh yeah, remember that thing you said to me earlier." Yeah. There was none of that. She was lucid. She was quite lucid.
Yeah, that's the medication, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
you could call it serendipity. You could call it, coincidence. But yeah, and to be honest with you, I'm not going to read any more into it than what it was. But just, it did strike me as being something really, really, profoundly strange. And then I went away. Oh yeah, and this is where the story gets really strange. I went away to America. We found out the doctor couldn't do anything. I was deeply upset. I was crying on the New Year's Eve, and I said, "Look, I'm going to cut the trip." We were supposed to say a week after New Year's. I said, "I want to go home now. I want to pick up." I knew we weren't far away from the end of things, and she'd lost her hair. I said, "Angela was a hairdresser by trade. I want to get her a wig that makes her look like her hair went before she lost her hair." So I did all that. We went home to Ireland, and I went up to visit her, and I walked up the long corridor to the room where she was, and I could hear she was in company. My parents were there, and a few people were there. And as I turned to go into the room, they were all sat around her bed, and she looked beyond them and saw me. She said, "Oh, look what the cat dragged in," she said. So I walked into the room, and I had a conversation with her and with everyone like she never had cancer. She asked me how I got on in America. She knew I had been away. She was completely coherent about everything. And as my parents and the doctors were saying, it's the strangest thing. Since you went, she had this rally forward where the cancer almost went into remission and she became herself again. Now, she was suffering from headaches, but she was making complete sense, like you and I talking here now.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that was the kind of the last little hurrah, and then she'd slipped away into really being what do they call it when you don't respond with whatsoever. You have no coherent.
But Fran, that's a lovely last time to see her.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, the fact that
yeah,
you had that conversation.
yeah.
But she
It was
must have
profound.
freaked out just to have
Yeah.
that conversation. That's
To the point where I looked at everybody as if to say, is this the same person? Like, you know, full of hugs, full of chat and conversations. A beautiful renaissance, like, almost, you know. And then a month later was catatonic, you know what I mean? And that was the end, really. But music, as they say, your hearing is always the last thing to go. So the people in the clinic were brilliant, saying, keep playing music, bring your guitar in, play music, play the radio, because it's still going through. She mightn't respond to you verbally, but she's hearing everything. So that's really how we treated that. But that was profound, and we lost Angela on St. Patrick's Day in 2004.
2004. Well, God
Yeah,
rest her. And
yeah,
just moving on a little bit,
yeah,
your career is amazing. I mean, like what you've done and the people you've played with in different bands.
yeah,
So
yeah.
give us a little run. I'm not asking you to drop names, but just a part of your story, because obviously I've read it all and we have spoken. So I'd like
Yeah,
my audience to hear it from the man
yeah.
himself.
I was really lucky. Really, my trajectory is, because when your resume says you're in a covers band or a tribute band, as they like to call it now, it seems very kind of not amazing and non kind of specifically standoutish. But I was lucky enough within the field I'm in here in Ireland to get known as a good singer, and I got a bit of session work. When I wasn't singing on my own records, I was paying the bills by singing on other people's records, whether it was doing oohs and ahs or sometimes doing lead vocals and not taking the credit. And I was always pursuing the songwriting for other people, which I'm still doing to this day. But along the way, my Beatles band had still been on the go. We were 35 years together, believe it or not, but we were starting to kind of get momentum on that scene, on the whole world tribute scene. We traveled all over the world. We played in the Cayman Islands and Latvia, Lithuania, you name it. We were there, France, Spain. But I got a call to do a Beatle convention in England, and I got to share the stage with the last lineup of Wings, Paul McCartney's Wings. So it was Denny Lane, Lawrence Huber, Steve Holly playing with our band, which was really, for me, that was it. Close the book now. These guys I adored. I loved London Town. The last, Back to the Egg was the last album all these guys had played on, which I loved, Baby's Request and all that stuff. Fantastic. So I was enamored by that. And I got to meet John Lennon's uncle Charlie, people who were still around. Alan Williams, the Beatles' first manager, the famous Beatles manager who gave them away.
That's right. Yeah.
So I rubbed shoulders with all these kind of people who are just names in a book to me, being a Beatle fanatic growing up. And then I came home and I was still on the scene doing that Beatles. We then changed our name to the Classic Beatles. We started dressing in the wigs and the suits then, and playing very genre specific. I would be Paul for the entire thing. Whereas in the old way we did the band is whoever knew the lyrics of the song sang it. Now I became a character. Now I just sing all of Paul's songs. The other guy sings all of John's songs. And that became really interesting and became hugely successful at home. We were packing out,
Wow.
6 nights sold out at the Olympia Theatre, queues. I was coming back after lunch one time. This was when I knew, hey, this band are doing something. A tout came over to me outside the Olympia and said, "You want a ticket to see the Classic Beatles tonight?" And I said, "No." And I looked at him kind of, just, absolutely, shocked. And he goes, "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm in the bloody band." So he thought it was hilarious. So anyway, I thought, yes, lad, you know, you're doing good. The Beach Boys are playing in the concert hall up the road and are not sold out. We're sold out for 6 nights. So we did really well. The scene was going really good. And then I got the dream call from Mr. Pat Egan, who we only spoke to about 2 weeks ago. Pat Egan, in case nobody knows, is an incredibly famous and wonderful promoter from Ireland who has an incredible book out at the moment about his memoir on his life.
Yeah, what's the name of his book? I didn't know about him.
Before the end of the interview, I will pull it out of the drawer. I have it over here. I'm actually mentioning it. Woohoo!
There you go.
I got a quick mention in the book. Very sweet. But Pat I got a call from Pat, or should I say, our manager at the time got a call from Pat, and he said, "Can I talk to young Fran?" So I got on the phone to Pat. I met Pat a handful of times. To me, he might as well have been, you know, Brendan Bean. He was the most famous kind of music promoter on the scene in Ireland, and you know, put festivals on, and you know, during the 80s, he was behind the whole Self-Aid, which was like a farmer's version of Live Aid that raised money for farms in Ireland during the deepest of a recession. So he was a legendary, luminary figure in the music scene here. And he said to me, "Fran, I have a question for you. I'm bringing a certain act over to the National Concert Hall. I wonder, would you like to be part of the show and sing for me on the show?" I said, "Who is it, Pat?" He goes, "It's Sir George Martin, the Beatles producer." And I nearly collapsed. So I said, "Jesus, of course I would be honored to be in the same room as the man."
Yeah.
So that was an incredible, I was kind of shocked. I actually thought for a little while he was winding me up because he knew I was in a Beatles cover band for years. And I thought, this is the fifth Beatle. Like, what does he mean? Are you interested? Like, you know, it's a silly question. So anyway, we were rehearsing in the factory, which is in Ringsend in Dublin. And day 2, with the band, a raggle-taggle gypsy of musicians I'd met over the years, all top of their game. He handpicked all these great musicians. And I was like saying to the MD, who's since left us, Patrick Fitzpatrick, great musical arranger. I said, "Pat, do you want me, am I playing and singing?" He said, "No, Fran, we just need your golden vocal cords." So it was great. So to me, it was the handiest gig in the world. I didn't even have to play an instrument. He said, "Yeah, we just need you to sing, you know, backing vocals for a load of songs. And then Sir George has a few in mind because he's heard your vocal range. And when he hears you again, he'll probably ask you to sing a few songs." Like, Jesus Christ. So I just thought I had a BV gig, you know? So in walks George Martin a week later. We'd been a week rehearsing with that band to get the rhythm section together and to work out all the harmonies, obviously, the intricate 6-part harmonies in a lot of them, which is really difficult to do. And a raggle-taggle name of guests that was unbelievable. You had like people like Leslie Dowdall from Intua Nua on vocals on one side. You had Liam Whaley from the Hothouse Flowers. You know,
Wow.
You had people like Jimmy McCarthy, who taught me I went to songwriting lessons with Jimmy McCarthy, the best songwriter Ireland ever produced, in my own opinion. He wrote, you know, so Ride On, so many great songs, fabulous. Like, and to see Jimmy again after not seeing him for years was wonderful. He's just a wonderful man. So anyway, Monday of the following week, George Martin walks in, accompanied by Giles Martin, his son. And he's wearing the cravat, and he's ever the English gentleman as you are, you know, the hunting jacket with the patches on the elbow. And he's like, "Hello, everybody. I'm pleased to meet you all. And let's see what you're made of." So he goes into the studio and he gets the sheet music and he's tapping the baton and he's, you know, George Martin. And I was just in awe of him. Now, I can read music very basically, but I wasn't, you know, an avid music reader. I was all self-taught. So obviously when he was referred to the orchestra, like bar 54 and stuff, like, you know, it might as well be double Dutch. So I had a little Sony Walkman cassette dictaphone recorder. So I was recording all of the rehearsals. So if he was going to farm any parts out, I would record my part into this and study that at home. That was my way of learning and getting through the not being able to quickly read the music. I could read the stuff, but it took me a little while, you know what I mean, to go, "Oh, hang on, that's fine middle C. Okay, here we go. Right, gotcha." But by then, the song is over. You know, these guys are reading it and singing it and reading it. So we did the rehearsals. We got to hang out with George Martin for a bit. I was bending his ear on the Beatles, but he was an absolute joy. The man, the only thing I could say to you about George Martin, and he would have been in his mid-80s then, was he spoke to you and he engaged with you with the same sense of humor of maybe a 19, 20-year-old. He was sharp, he was funny, he was sarcastic, like deadpan, you know, real dead face and be real sarcastic. And the only way you'd kind of look away to Giles, the son, and his son would be laughing. And I'd say, oh, he's winding me up. He was winding you up. He was so, I could see why the Beatles clicked with him. He had such a youthful sense of humor, and he was so fast on everything, musical uptake, on the sense of humor uptake, and an absolute gentleman. And I say an absolute gentleman, like he was fielding questions that must have been sounded like I was a BBC reporter interviewing him, you know. But he was, you know, talking about the goons and all this stuff, the people he'd worked with. And the beauty of it is, and I didn't find this out till later, I'd left my tape recorder recording, so I recorded all the conversations with him.
Oh,
so they're wonderful. They're wonderful anecdotal things to have, including the funny moments, because there were funny moments. There was a funny moment when I nearly left the show. We came into rehearse on maybe day 4, and we were doing Because, the big Beatles song from Abbey Road, because the world is round. There was a harmony in that. Now, he was dividing it up in because it's 3 main harmonies that are then layered by the Beatles. You know, they did all their own vocals, obviously. But because we had 6 of us singing, he was breaking it up into 9ths and 6ths and 5ths. Now, I'm used to the 5th and the 7th as a harmony singer.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
wishing me the 6th or something, or the 9th. It was an unorthodox harmony anyway. And I was like, oh, God, how am I going to remember this? So as we were singing it, with just him at the piano, by the way, the band had gone on lunch. He's at the piano, and he's like this, his eyes closed, and we're listening, we're singing away, and he's stopping the playing. Who's singing? There's 2 of you clashing on the 5th, and I knew it was me. I was like, now the sweat is starting to profusely come down my forehead and over my ears. Was going, Jesus Christ, George Martin is pulling me to task here, and I'm going to make a fucking show of myself in front of the greatest musical producer there's ever been. So he went through everybody's individual parts. What are you singing? Da, 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 da. Yeah, great, that's good. And he got to me. What are you singing? So because we started, and he goes, you're wrong. And I was like, oh, no shit, Sherlock. I'm absolutely wrong. I'm singing somebody else's part. He goes, no, I want you to sing this one. Because the world is round, it turns me on. And it's this weird, unorthodox movement. I was like, oh, God, how am I going to remember that? It's not anyway catchy. I can't remember. So we did it a few times. And he kept stopping the piano going, no, 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 no. He pointed at me. You're not there yet. So everybody was I could feel everybody else feeling for me, you know, that kind of way.
Yeah.
I could feel they were going, this fucking idiot, he's normally good, but what's going on here? So he had all the patience in the world, but he was starting to lose his patience a little bit here. So it eventually, about the 4th time doing this on piano, we got to it, and I went a cappella, and I said, come on, Fran, you can do this. And I nailed it. And then he looked at me in front of everybody. He said, by George, he's got it. Oh my God.
You would have gone.
Embarrassing. Embarrassing. So we actually rapped for that day. And I said to the other guy, who is also a vocalist, and he had the handy one. He had the 7th, which is the one I always sing on that song. I said, you have my one, you damn lucky git. And he's like, oh man, he was really grilling you there. So I went home to my girlfriend, who became my wife a year later. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to knock it on the head. I don't think I'm cut out for this. And she was like, what do you mean? He's like, George Martin pulled me to task today. And he was right. I was all over the place. He had farmed out a harmony to me. I couldn't memorize it for life or money. She said, well, it was because you were nervous. It's George Martin. It's one of your idols of all time, you know, the most famous record producer ever. I was like, yeah, but I just couldn't get it to work. And when I got it in the end, it was probably a fluke. It's probably out of being scared. And she goes, no. I think he's just testing to see what he can get out of you. Why would he give you an unorthodox harmony like that? Maybe he wants you to do other things. And I was like, oh, you're just being nice. No, I think I'm going to quit tomorrow. I don't think I'm cut out for this. I'd rather go to the show than make a show of myself. So she said, just, you know, learn your part overnight. You have the tape of it there. Listen. Now, the next day was full orchestra rehearsal. So now we had the full orchestra and us. This was in the rehearsals, it was just the singers, the piano, George Martin and me. So we went into the full rehearsals, and like that, he got the orchestra to sit this one out. And I thought, oh God, it's because now he's really going to hear. He wants to hear all the parts. Obviously, he doesn't want the orchestra, so he can't hear the individual parts. So he was conducting, and the orchestra played the intro, and then they quieten down, and the singers kick in. So that was fine. Part one, because was great, fine. Then it got to the love is old, love is new, and then he stood up, and he was kind of listening, kind of wait for it, and then we nailed it. I'd spent so much time listening to it that night. I knew it in my sleep. So we got it, and it was beautiful. The turnaround was gorgeous. And he just looked at me like this, and he went like that. He gave me a nod, and I thought, Jesus, he remembered. He was looking for the weak link to see if he'd nailed it. So I thought, Jesus, I've survived that just about. But look, I'm on the back foot here now. I really have to do my homework and stay on the ball. So we took a break. We rehearsed a lot of the early songs that the guests like Liam O'Malley was singing, and Jimmy McCarthy and Leslie Dowdall and people like that. And we took a break, and next of all, I heard somebody calling my name. It was George Martin had called me over to him. I thought, here we go, you're fired. Yeah. So I walked over, and he said, Fran, he says,
cheerio, Fran. Cheerio, Fran.
Like, yes, he said, you really got a handle on that now, haven't you? And I was like, yeah. I said, really apologize. I couldn't apologize enough. He goes, not at all. He said, I've given you an unorthodox part. He said, this is by far not a singer's part. This is like mechanical. And I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. He said, well, how's this for you? Would you do me a favor? Would you sing Yesterday in the show solo? And I nearly actually had to look behind me thinking, is he talking to somebody else? And I was like, oh my, Yesterday in the show? Absolutely. So the only one thing is we're not doing it in the key of F that Paul did it in. We're doing it 2 keys higher in G, which is really high. But luckily for me, it's within the range of my voice. And I said, I'd be honored to do it, Sir George. And not only then did he give me Yesterday to sing solo in the show with him conducting the orchestra, he also said, I've also seen that you're doing so well with that, because I nailed it in the first take. He was like, that's exemplary. And he said, he also said, which was it's a quote I use to this day, he says, your voice is uncannily like Paul's. You have an uncanny resemblance. In your enunciation and stuff. I was like, wow, okay, well, that's the years of being a tribute artist, trying to really mimic the isms. So he said, I'm doing a medley of the Beatle girls, Michelle and Eleanor Rigby. Would you sing them for me as well? So I got to solo on 3 pieces in the show. And I have them all on CD because RTE recorded the entire show. So I have them to this day, including him introducing me on stage to sing them for you, Mr. Fran King, and the place standing up in uproar. It was great.
Did you want to put them on the end of the show?
I don't know if I have them. I'll have to root them out. They're on CD.
That's
somewhere.
okay. We'll find them.
I'll find it somewhere.
Can't hide from us.
But yeah, so that was a dream come true to work with George Martin and Giles, his son, who's a lovely guy. And then I got to work with him years later again. That was in 2000. I got to, or 1999. It was his last tour. He did Dublin, the Hollywood Bowl. The reason apparently he wanted to play in Ireland is he was a huge fan of the horses. He'd never come to Ireland to see horse racing, and if he could get a show in on his retirement tour, great. So he had all these local Irish stars that were, headlining on the show and stuff like that. So he did that, and he did Tel Aviv for some reason as well. He'd never played in Israel and did Tel Aviv. So yeah, George Martin formally retired after that tour. In 2004, the year my sister died, we had heard that he had been given an honorary degree by UCD in literature or something like that, in writing, and that he had duly agreed to come over and accept the award with his son Giles. So he came, and Giles had called the band because we'd worked with him before with that show. And he said, would you guys do an hour of Beatles songs before my dad comes to the podium? Absolutely. So we did that. And then George came, and he accepted the award in the cap and gown and the whole lot. And then I brought a poster of him, which was on the college wall, saying he was going to be here the following, Thursday, up to be signed. And he looked at me as I brought up the sign. He goes, Fran? I was like, yeah. So George, he said, absolutely lovely to see you, mate. And he signed the poster. Good to see you, mate. All the best, Sir George. And Giles signed it. And I have a frame downstairs. And I'll take you over if I can to see my I don't know if you can see that, me and Sir George.
Pull back a little bit. Yep. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was presented to us by Pat Egan, the promoter. It was for outstanding contribution to the show, and it was almost a non-contribution after that first rehearsal.
I was gonna say you did well there, Fran.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
what was the Paul McCartney thing that I heard? Paul McCartney, the play.
Oh yeah, well we have a show on the go at the moment. It's called McCartney All the Best.
Yes.
What happened was I just before COVID hit, I was asked to join a Beach Boys tribute band called the Bootleg Beach Boys from Dublin. An incredible set of musicians. There was 5 of us, just like the Beach Boys, and we all sang 5-part harmony. And somebody had heard, what I did with George Martin, and said, "Look, will you be Brian Wilson, the highest vocal in this show?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to do it." So we did that. I joined that band in Dublin. We did a few warm-up shows in the Sugar Club and stuff, and then we headed off to tour in Australia, believe it or not. And after that, we went to New Zealand, all over Europe, all over the UK, did a UK tour, did a Scottish tour. So enjoyed it, loved it, had a great time doing it I was in that band for 8 years. And then COVID struck. I actually got COVID on tour in Belgium on the way home. I realized I was diagnosed with COVID. And this is early doors. So obviously nobody worked for 2 years with COVID, but I masterminded a plot to do a McCartney solo years tribute when the doors opened again, but to cover from his Beatles years right into Wings and solo, because the band I'd been with for 30 years did strictly Beatles, and it all ended in 1969 with that band. But this would be a way of utilizing my years of tribute work, in between doing your original stuff and doing all the other projects you do. I just figured this would be a labor of love to do a McCartney years called McCartney All the Best, the band. So we did that. We set that up. My girlfriend at the time, blonde girl, musician, brilliant, played piano, was Linda McCartney. We built a band like Wings around us, and we did everything from Wings right up to solo years, nearly up to contemporary McCartney. And I'm still involved in that band. I'm actually playing next month is our last show of the year, of this year, before we rebrand and we reboot for next year to all the tours and festivals and stuff like that. So that's my McCartney connection, still going to this day.
You're amazing. Now I noticed in the conversation there, you went into the first girlfriend, the first wife, and second wife. How many times have you been married there now?
I've only been married the once. I got married in 2000 and only divorced earlier this year. So we were 18 years married and 8 or 9 years separate. So we probably get on now better than we ever did, to be honest, because for the simple fact as well, which does help, is she lives next door.
She does not.
She does. So it's like, hello, neighbor.
Brilliant. What's her name? Give her a shout out.
Lorianne. There she is. Yeah. No, we're great. We're good friends, good pals.
Yes.
We have a lot of respect. And nothing ended in acrimony. It wasn't one of those kind of divorces where they didn't talk to each other and it was the War of the Roses. It was actually fine. We got married in New York in 2000. Naive kids, and we life took its toll on all of us. Probably didn't help that I'd been through a lot of tragedy and was carrying that stuff around me. So mea culpa for a lot of that stuff, because I only really put all that down properly, I suppose, formally about in the last couple of years, to really go to grief counseling and therapy and really kind of get a fresh page to work from, that kind of way, and not carry around these ghosts of Christmas past, because really that stuff it puts you on constant cortisol, and it's not good, so
it's not good for your mental health.
No.
And you've got to write a song. I was thinking there when you said living next door to Alice, but you got to do one with your ex-wife.
Yeah.
Come on, sing us a song.
That'll be the theme of the next album. The Ghost of Christmas Past, we'll call the next album. No, it's It's good. And I was in a relationship, as I was saying, as I alluded to earlier, with Eleanor. She's actually still in the McCartney band until our next show, and then she's leaving full time to pursue. She's doing a degree, I think, in psychology. Um, so we had a nature relationship, very happy, lovely again, and it's just one of those things. It just wasn't
Yeah.
meant to be, and that's fine. Again, kind of ended in a lot of respect. You know, I'm not a drama queen, despite being a musician. I'm not a drama queen.
Yeah.
But I have my moments, like anybody, and I was diagnosed early last year with OCD. So I do overthink a little bit. Um, Not the kind of OCD where you're checking to see if everything's in a row or switching light switches on off. Just a little bit
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
overthinking and all that kind of stuff. Rumination. I always wondered. I thought everybody was wired like me, and I am wired like my brain is like going 360 at 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, my
Well, I
kids
think
laugh.
I might have what you have, OCD, because my
Yeah,
brain never stops either. But I love the
yeah.
fact when you say with your girlfriend or your ex-wife or that, because I've got
Mm.
three, as you know, and it's beautiful to stay friends.
Yeah,
You know,
I
to,
think
to,
so.
to get out at the time, but stay friends. And like you said, well, you got your wife living next door. I'm not that brave, but um, but yeah, it's just talking, and it's great because there's no secrets. You can just talk as you
Yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
Yeah, what
Fran,
happened? What happened, and we were out. We're all out the other side of it. It's like we've gone through the chicanes of the river, you know, and now we're into the calm waters, and it's a nice place to be, you know, and everybody's friends. And really, the most important thing, and I know it sounds a bit like a cliche, the most important thing are the kids, and the kids. I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed to have two really good kids. When I say kids, my daughter's 20 and in her second year of college. My son is the senior drummer in Templeogue College. He's in fifth year, so he graduates high school next year.
what's their
So
names?
Evie is my daughter's name, or Eve, but we call her Evie
Yeah,
affectionately. My son's called Jack,
Jack. Yeah.
and yeah, he's an avid musician. He wants to be both a zoologist and a musician at the same time. My daughter is in the film business like her mother, so she's studying her BA in film school, and my son is just finishing high school. So I'm very lucky, but he's a fabulous musician. I was only listening to him play drums because you can't really not hear him playing drums next door. I was listening to him yesterday, and just his rudimentary work and his stuff is just, he's going to have no problem. And he's an avid reader. He reads the dots early doors. So he'll sit in with any orchestra or any session and be able to read the dots and play timpani or any kind of percussion. You know, because Templeogue College is renowned for its musicians and
Yeah.
its sports athletes and people like that. So it's fabulous. I'm very lucky in that respect, you
Well,
know.
Fran, you sound like you're happy and you are lucky, man. And
Yeah,
I'm sorry, we've done our hour. I could sit and talk to you all day. And we're going to
yeah,
put
it
up
would be
some
lovely.
photographs at the end here and a couple of your songs at the end of it. And I just ask you one question before we finish, which I normally do is what
Yeah,
advice would you give to someone that's in the music business or, you know, obviously, as you said, you've been signed for record or then knocked out. You know, when you get knocked down, isn't that part of the
yeah.
grown up? But what advice would you give for other younger musicians coming up along the ladder?
Yeah, I think, and I've only said this to my daughter yesterday. We were having a conversation in the city, and we were talking. She was asking me a similar question, and I would say the advice or the life experience I've gotten is stick at what you're doing. If you're good at something and you know it innate, now you obviously you have to know. It's not like somebody told you you're great, but if you know you're good at doing something, perseverance, 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 perseverance. You know, trends come, things change, but if you're good at what you do, don't be one of these people that flops into another industry or another industry
Mm.
because you'll find yourself constantly moving, you know, with the ebb and flow. You've got to stick to what you're good at. If you know your strengths, capitalize on them. Now, it might mean you're not doing much for a little while, or it might mean you're having to go down a different avenue to pursue what you're
Mm.
doing.
Mm.
But at the end of the day, stick with it. If you know you have a talent, or you have, especially if you have a love for what you're doing, and you know the old saying, don't you? The old Irish saying, "If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life."
I interviewed my good friend Daniel O'Donnell
Yeah,
recently, and he said the only guilt he had ever was I enjoyed what I was doing. It wasn't
yeah,
like a job. And I
Yeah,
think we're
same here.
all like that. I've done that myself
Yeah.
in hotels. But Fran, can I just thank you so much? It's been an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure. It really has.
Ah, same here. I could talk for another 12 hours on this stuff.
Oh, well, you know what I'm like. You couldn't shut me up, but you did very well.
Oh,
Fran,
thank you.
thank you so much. And we're going to finish off with some photographs and some songs from Fran, and you'll really enjoy it. And at the description at the front, you get a link to old Fran's website and everything, and enjoy it. And I'd like to thank all my listeners here in Australia and all over the world. And Fran, you have a lovely day. It's my evening, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, all of the above.
Well, give out your website there. What is
There's,
it?
there's a website for the McCartney band if you want to follow that. Because really I do all my social media through the standard Facebook and Instagram. You can find me just at Fran King at those, or Fran King Music. One of them, you'll see the white hair, you'll know it's me. Yeah, so McCartney all the best .ie is the band website for the McCartney tribute band.
Fran, we put all the links on the description at the start. And again,
Brilliant.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Oh, I loved it, Marty. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you so
It's funny when I think about you, see a smile break on my face, 'cause I love everything about you. Please don't ever, please don't ever change. The way my heart beats when you're near me, when you look into my eyes, it's like the first time that you see me, as I truly am. So will you always be my love? And I will never miss a day. I will freeze it here in time.